everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Cover 2 podcast. My name is Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And today we have a wonderful show for you guys today, a football-filled show. Lots of big storylines going on in the NFL and college football, and even outside of the NFL on high school fields and stuff like that, too.
Apparently.
Yes, so we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about Tua's injury, what that means for the NFL and college football. We're going to talk about Colin Kaepernick's workout. We gave our thoughts on it last week going into it, and I think there's a lot to talk about after with all that went down, the site being moved and the way the workout went. And then, but we're going to start the podcast with something interesting here because the college football playoff rankings just came out about 30 minutes ago. We haven't really researched any of the teams as of right now. We're kind of just going to give our raw thoughts. You look at the top top 7 teams did not change, but there's still a lot to talk about, especially with Tua's injury, which we'll get to a little bit later. We're going to analyze whether Alabama deserves to get in. But Jared, what are your initial thoughts on the college football rankings for Week 13?
I'm really not surprised, and the thing is, at this point, the cream of the crop is rising to the top, and we're starting to see LSU and Ohio State, I think, are kind of implanted in the number 1 and number 2 spots. They're cemented down. Ohio State still has 2, I would say, very tough games. They don't really have a cakewalk going into this college football playoff. Ohio State has a home matchup against Penn State, who's kind of reeling the last few weeks. And then they have their rivalry game at Michigan. And that Michigan has looked a lot better as this season has gone on. So, even though I think Ohio State is clearly the second best team in the nation, I'm, not going to sit here and bet the house that they will finish the season undefeated. You never know with them. I think LSU, clearly the number 1 team. Clemson, they're undefeated at 11-0. Unfortunately for Clemson, I think when it comes to strength of schedule, who have they played this year? They played Texas A&M at home. They beat them like 24-3. It wasn't really impressive. Trevor Lawrence has looked like a shell of himself. I don't know if it's because defenses have figured him out a little bit, but Clemson doesn't seem to have that kind of moxie about them this year, yet they're still sitting undefeated and in the number 3 spot. And Georgia, with a big win at Auburn last week, kind of planting themselves into that number 4 spot.
Yeah.
Georgia is basically also gotten himself into the SEC championship game in Atlanta, so more than likely they will face LSU. That will be a huge matchup. More than likely, bumping out the loser of that matchup from the college football championship. So, no changes from last week. I'm not surprised at all. Are you surprised that there weren't any changes? Do you feel that an Oregon team should have gotten in at number 4, or are you okay with how these top 4 teams are?
No. The top 4 is fine with me. I think there is actually somewhat of an argument that you could have moved Georgia to number 3 and Clemson number 4. But as far as the 4 teams go,
okay, I can maybe run with that a little bit.
As far as the 4 teams go, these are the 4 teams. Alabama obviously has not played anybody besides Texas A&M, and their one big game they played, they lost by a significant amount as well. So they do not deserve to be in there. And Oregon and Utah, both with 1 loss. Oregon with a loss to Auburn, Utah with a loss to USC, who is now ranked in the college football playoff, which helps them.
Exactly.
And rather bad schedules like Alabama, they don't really deserve to be in yet either. So, yeah, we have our 4 teams here, and I think Georgia. What's crazy about Georgia too? There might be a little conversation last week why they were the 4th team, because they do have the loss to Notre Dame. But with the win against Auburn and how Notre Dame absolutely destroyed Navy last week, who was ranked at the time, Georgia's looking a lot better. They also play Texas A&M, who's a solid team. That's a good win. And then they play LSU. For how difficult Georgia's schedule has been, if they even end up on the season with 2 losses, I think there's going to be a lot of people asking why maybe an Oregon, a Utah, or an Alabama gets in ahead of them if that does happen and if they do end up losing to LSU. But as far as this week goes, these are the 4 teams, and this is the way it should stay. I do want to kind of debate what's going on in kind of the middle, and that's 9 through 5. Like I mentioned, Alabama's number 5, Oregon's number 6, Utah's number 7, Penn State's number 8, and number 9 is Oklahoma. And I think the biggest question about the rankings this week is why Oklahoma is behind some of these teams. When you look at Oklahoma's schedule compared to a lot of these teams, they do have that one loss to Kansas State, who's not ranked.
It's a bad loss.
In 6-4.
It's a bad loss.
Yeah, it's a bad loss. But they had the huge win at Baylor last week. Huge come from behind win. They did beat Texas, who was ranked number 11 when they played them. And Utah and Oregon's, they have not beaten really anybody in the current top 25 right now. And Penn State as well. They did beat Iowa and they did beat Michigan, but with a loss to Minnesota looks a lot worse right now, so there's a debate there as well. Why Oklahoma and Penn State?
So you're on the Oklahoma train, is as in maybe they shouldn't be in the top 4, but they should be higher than 9.
The top 4 right now are what they should be. Nobody else should be in the top 4 besides the 4 teams they're in. But when we're looking at Georgia potentially losing in an SEC championship game, Ohio State potentially losing some of these games down the road, Clemson losing any game period, you have to look at it and be like, okay, well, who are the next teams in line to make it? And teams like Oklahoma and Penn State should be ahead of all 3 of Alabama, Oregon, and Utah right now, in my opinion, based on their wins and based on their win-loss rate.
So just specifically talking about Oklahoma,
yeah.
I think there's 2 reasons why Oklahoma is currently sitting at number 9 and not any higher, and I think that is very recent lack of success, right?
Yes.
They lose to Kansas State, at Kansas State, so it's an away game, but you lose to an unranked team that is mediocre at best. Like, they're not very good, right? There's no reason why they should, in the way they lost to. It's not like they lost by a field goal. They ended up coming back and making it a game, but I mean, they were getting dominated in that game. And then this past Saturday, they're getting dominated 28-3 at halftime by Baylor. Now, Baylor, to their credit, is a very good team this year. No one expected that. They came out of nowhere. But for Oklahoma, for some reason, they just don't seem to start games very well. They're almost like the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL. It's like the first quarter they're asleep, and then it's like, oh my gosh, we need to wake up and somehow score points because we're down by 14 automatically. I don't trust Oklahoma's defense, and I think that's they do give up way too many points when you get in this college football championship or games down the stretch. I think defense is you have to be able to stop teams, and if you can't consistently stop teams, I don't care how many points you score, you have to rely on your defense at some point. I don't think Oklahoma can. I think the committee is also seeing that and saying, okay, Oklahoma has had, yes, they came back and beat Baylor, but it took a lot to do that. They were down by double digits. They were down by double digits to Kansas State, and I think they're looking at this team as a whole and saying they're not collectively great as a whole. Yes, offensively with Jalen Hurts and CeCe Lamb and all those guys, they are very good on the offensive side, but as an entire team, as an entire unit, I don't think they can compete with the top dogs in the top 4, and I think that's why they're keeping them at number 9.
Yeah, and that's respectable, and that's what the committee should do. They shouldn't just look at records. I'm just saying, when you look at, and here's the thing, when you look at Penn State, I just thought about this too. Like I said, we're going to be giving these kind of off the top of our heads, so cut us some slack if we make some mistakes here. But
no, don't put us slack.
Yeah, Penn State does play Ohio State this week, so they win. That helps a lot, and essentially this number 8 ranking for Penn State doesn't really matter, because if they lose, they're eliminated, and they're going to be behind Oklahoma pretty much regardless. And if they win, there's going to be a debate whether they should actually be in the top 4. So I'll take the Penn State thing off. But when you look at Oklahoma compared to Utah and Oregon,
2 Pac-12 teams.
Yeah, 2 Pac-12 teams. Oklahoma, although they have lost to Kansas State, they beat Baylor. They're gonna have a game against Oklahoma State, who's ranked number 21 later this season. They have a game against TCU, and TCU has fought everyone difficult this year. And then they'll play probably Baylor again. So if they're able to beat Baylor twice, beat Texas when they were ranked number 11, and also beat Oklahoma State in the rivalry game, I know we're looking ahead, but why right now when you look at how Utah's only beaten ASU, who's not ranked right now.
I mean, the Pac-12 is weak. I'm sorry.
Well, no, but this is what I'm saying. So you look at, just compare this. This is why.
No, I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah, no. But so Oklahoma has wins over Texas and Baylor right now. their losses to Kansas State, a 4-loss team. Okay, Utah has beaten ASU, who's not ranked, and their loss is to USC, a 4-loss team. How the hell is Oklahoma behind Utah right now? I get why they'd be behind Penn State because, like we said, Penn State's ranking doesn't really matter right now because of what game they have coming up. But, like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you look at Oregon. Oregon has a loss to Auburn, way better loss than either Utah or Oklahoma.
Okay.
Their only win is against Washington, who I believe is a 4-loss team.
Okay, here's the thing, right? I think the committee also looks at if you're going to lose, it's better to lose at the beginning of the season, right? You leave a bad taste in the committee's mouth.
That's a good point.
And I think that sticks with them. So Oregon's loss, you mentioned, that was the first week of the season, or technically the second week, but Oregon's first game of the season.
Yeah.
So even though they did lose, it was basically at the last second. It wasn't like they got blown out. And since then, they have basically come out and dominated every single opponent. So they've kind of made up for that loss. The later in the season that you lose, you have less of a chance to kind of make up for that loss. And I think that's where Oklahoma is right now. The fact that they lost to Kansas State middle of the season, and they were getting whooped in the entire first half by Baylor. They had to come back to beat Baylor by over 20 points. I think that just leaves a bad taste in the committee's mouth. They want to see teams be dominant for an entire game, right? Not just for one half or one quarter. And so I think right now the inconsistency of Oklahoma is the reason why they're at number 9. And like I said, there's just a bad taste in their mouth right now because Oklahoma isn't kind of firing on all cylinders to where Oregon right now, I think you can say they're playing some of the best football in college football, period.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really where it comes down to is Oregon deserves to be where they are. Utah's lost to SC. I get it. USC is now ranked 23rd, but
still a 4-loss team.
It's still a 4-loss team.
Yeah, and I bet you if you look at the way the rankings are, you never know. Kansas State could be there 28-30. What's the difference between that and 23?
Right. I'm with you if you want to sit here and argue and say that Oklahoma and Penn State deserve to be above Utah, but I'm going to give Oregon, in my opinion, the only legitimate Pac-12 team, some clout here and say that they deserve to be at number 6.
Well, like I said, we still do have a couple games. Oklahoma is going to have a chance to play either Oklahoma State twice or Baylor twice to this season. So that will help them compared to Oregon and Utah essentially just playing each other at the end of the season. So we'll see where that debate ends up. Also, if Auburn's able to quote-unquote, upset Alabama, they don't have to anymore, that also helps Oregon's case as well if Auburn then floats into the top 10 at the end of the season. So there still is the football to play, but I just wonder why sometimes we have these debates and we look at literally what's happened. And I get that Oklahoma might not have played as good, but like the losses are just not equal to what Utah has. And to be honest, we could go through this whole thing as well and maybe get all 4 of those teams we just talked about and put them ahead of Alabama too. The way Alabama's schedule's been, I know they've blown some teams out, but why is Alabama at number 5 when you have Penn State losing to 2 ranked teams?
Well, let's talk about Alabama for a minute, right? Because they obviously, for those who weren't watching the game, had a huge injury to Tua Tagovailoa, who is going to be
the biggest in college football.
The potential number 1 pick in the draft this year. Alabama is beating Mississippi State 35-7 in the second quarter. There's less than 2 minutes left, and Nick Saban chooses to bring Tua back in the game because he, quote, wanted to work on the 2-minute offense. Tua gets sacked by 2 defenders. He has a major hip injury, breaks his nose on the same play, has to get carted off the field, and Alabama's hopes essentially just went poof right then and there, right? And of course, you know that after the post-game press conference, every question fired at Nick Saban is going to be, why was Tua in the game against a non-ranked opponent, a team that is not good at all, when you were up 35-7? His excuse was he wanted Tua to run the 2-minute
That's a bad
drill.
excuse. That's a bad excuse, and here's the thing about that too. When you look at Alabama's schedule as well, you're up 35-7. Was it the first drive after the second half, or was it?
No, this was still in the first half.
Okay, still in the first half.
This is still in the first half.
You look at 35-7. You're playing a team that you're obviously going to beat. I know Alabama and some of these other teams are real weird about how they keep. I mean, we've seen the Patriots keep Tom Brady in way too long in some of these blowout games, stuff like that. But you look at it, they're going to win that game. They play a FCS opponent this week, so you essentially could just bench
You
again.
could have, you know.
Yeah, and then you have the big game against Auburn, which is essentially the only way, a big win there is the only way you're going to get into the college football playoff. I mean, why not just literally rest Tua, who was dealing with injuries that had nothing to do with his hip or his nose?
That's where I have an issue to begin with. Tua, coming into this game, did not even go through his normal pregame warm-up routine. He had to alter that in order to get himself prepared. He warmed up, and literally right until kickoff, I watched the beginning of that game. The announcers did not know if Tua was going to start until he actually ran onto the field after the opening kickoff. Like, Nick Saban, nor did anyone else on the Alabama coaching staff actually give away. They probably didn't even know up until the opening kickoff if Tua was going to start. So the fact that was going through their minds, they probably should. Now, like, this is Monday morning quarterbacking right now. I'm just going to admit it. Tua should not have even played in that game. Period. You're going up against an unranked team. I guess it's an SEC opponent. I get that it's an SEC opponent in Mississippi State, but it's an unranked opponent who is not good. Just flat out, they're not good. There's no way that Alabama was going to lose to Mississippi State, whether they started Tua or they started their backup. I believe their backup is Jones, right? He's a 4 or 5 star recruit. He's done fairly well in mop-up duty this year.
He is the new guy now.
He is now the incumbent starter. But what I'm saying is Tua should not have even played in this game, knowing that next week they're going up against an FCS opponent, and then you give him 2 full weeks off to prepare for Auburn, right? So, okay, fine, I get it. You play him, you start him, you've got a 35-7 lead. Let me ask a couple questions here. Is Tua a freshman?
No.
Okay. How many national championship games has Tua been in?
He's been in 2 and he's won 1.
2 and he's won 1.
Yeah.
All right, and let's say that he's been in a handful of big games, 2 national championship games. He's played against LSU. He's played against Auburn. He's played in big rivalry games. Right? Would you say that Tua is, for a college quarterback, an experienced player?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah.
So why the hell does Nick Saban need to see Tua in a 2-minute drill against a crappy team?
Yeah, see, that's exactly.
That's called an excuse.
Yeah, the 2-minute thing is complete BS
It's
based
an
on what you
excuse.
just said too. Because why does he need to be 2 minutes? And why do you need your quarterback doing 2-minute drills when he has an injured ankle?
Thank you.
He just had surgery
Thank
like
you.
a couple weeks
Like,
ago.
you want to put a 2-minute drill in or see what your backup quarterback has
Oh,
in a 2-minute
absolutely.
situation? That makes sense. Tua, a veteran player who's been to 2 national championship games, played in multiple big-time games before, and you need to see what he can do in a 2-minute situation? Get out of here.
Yeah.
That is my biggest issue with this right now, is his explanation and his reasoning for why. If Nick Saban would have came out and just flat out said, we made a mistake, we shouldn't have had him in the game, I would at least respect that response a little bit more, as opposed to just selling out and saying, oh, we wanted him in for a 2-minute drill. Get out of here, man. That right there just shows me that, you know what? I hope Alabama does not make it in. I hope Alabama gets whooped by Auburn, and I hope that we're not even talking about them in the college football playoff right now, because I don't think they deserve it, and I think at the end of the day, as much as you want to say that they've had injuries on defense, they're very young on defense, I think this came down to their coaching, and I think their coaching will be the reason why they are not in the college football playoff.
And like we were just talking about before we transitioned to the NFL ramifications to his injury, because that's probably a bigger deal here. Like the Alabama's in championship every single year, they don't need Tua. We've been debating why is Alabama ranked so high? Who have they beaten? It's all this stuff, and then you see a bad decision like this. I mean, like you're saying, he barely started the game, so wouldn't you have him on a short leash? You go up 35-7, that's like where okay, we're good. He won us the game. We'll put in the backup. If it gets sketchy, we'll bring him back in. Right? At worst, we'll bring him back in. He's come in the middle of a national championship game and won you a game. I think he can do it against a team that's literally battling for bowl eligibility in Mississippi State. And then you keep him in, he gets hurt. So yeah, I completely agree with you. It was a bad decision. It's a horrible excuse by Nick Saban. And this is also, to play devil's advocate a little bit here, maybe because we've been talking about these rankings, because they've only beaten Texas A&M, who's not ranked, and because their only loss came to LSU, and it was way worse than the score shows, maybe Nick Saban was like, we need a beat down. We need to score 80 points in this game. We need to score 80 points next week, and we need to beat the hell out of Auburn.
I'm glad you said that. Our resident friend of the show, Alex Silva, who's been on a few times, I was actually speaking with him last night, and he actually brought up that point, and I think that is the only,
that's the only thing that makes sense.
The only legitimate reason why Tua should have still been in the game is because Nick Saban said, we need to beat the crap out of this team by 60 to prove that, hey, we are that dominant and we can still compete with the top 4 teams as of right now. That is the only argument that I think Nick Saban really has, or the only leg he had to stand on. Anything else, I think, is a bunch of BS, is basically excuses. And like I said, I think this injury comes down to Nick Saban. It really does, right? You have a player. You are in Nick Saban, the head coach, right? The guru. He's the Bill Belichick of the college football world. He is basically in control of Tua. Yeah. If Nick Saban says, Tua, you're not playing, Tua's not playing, right? You of course Tua is going to want to play. He's a competitor. He's an athlete. He's playing for Alabama. Of course he's going to want to play. I think it's on the coaching staff, the training staff, the team as a whole to kind of rein him back in and say, hey, listen, we don't need you for a game against a mediocre team. We need you against Auburn to get ourselves into the college football play.
That's true.
So I think they kind of got ahead of themselves a little bit, and were kind of looking towards the future a little too much as opposed to looking at reality, on Saturday.
Yeah, and like you're saying, one of the reasons that they might have needed a beat down here is because although they have a lot of wins this season, and a lot of blowout wins, some of them have been 20-point, 30-point, low 40s. I know that kind of sounds ridiculous to say, but Ohio State's out here beating teams by 60. And LSU's beating teams by 50. And when you're looking and you're comparing the wins to a down SEC this year, at least in some of the teams they've played this year, you do need to be beating these teams by 60 and 70 potentially. And by not winning these games by so much, it is hurting their prowess, and it's probably why they're number 5 and all this stuff. So, I think the only possible scenario here why they wanted Tua in there for longer than he should have been is because they needed a really big win, and maybe they didn't trust their backups to do what Tua could do, and they didn't. The score ended up being 38-7, and when Tua got hurt, it was 35-7 in the second half. So, there's no running clock in college football. That means they literally didn't score touchdowns for the rest of the game. So, maybe Saban knows something about Mac Jones and about Tua's brother that we don't, and that maybe this Auburn game is going to be a little more interesting than we think, and maybe Auburn's going to grab a huge win here in 2 weeks. Let's move to the NFL. Tua is one of the top picks, if not the top pick in this year's NFL draft. He's a top, he's a top quarterback prospect. Do you see these injuries, well, really just the one hip injury, affecting his draft stock, and do you see guys like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert now 100% being drafted before him?
Regardless of this Tua injury, I feel that Joe Burrow has set himself up to be the top quarterback taken in this draft. Now, I think there's a huge case to be made that the defensive end from Ohio State, Chase Young, is arguably the best, most talented player and could be taken number 1 ahead of any quarterback coming out in this draft. But I believe that Joe Burrow is the number 1, the first quarterback that will be taken. And then I think there is a legitimate argument that you could say Oregon quarterback Justin Herbert is right there neck and neck with Tua. Yes, Tua has won a national championship. He's played in big games, but I think that he from an NFL standpoint, making the NFL throws, I don't know if he has the strongest arm, if he can make those long, over the field sideline throws that you're going to need to make in certain situations. So I think Justin Herbert is a prototype. He's about 6'6". He can make all those throws and he can run. And listen, the injury to Tua, they say, is about a 3 to 4 month recovery. So he more than likely will not work out for the NFL Combine when that comes around. I believe if he's healthy, he will wait until his pro day when he has a little more say in the type of workout that goes on. And obviously he's going to want to put his best foot forward for all the NFL scouts. So no doubt in my mind, Tua is a first-round draft pick still. But like I said, regardless of this injury, I think that Justin Herbert and Burrow, I think, are ahead of Tua as far as the quarterback rankings go.
Yeah, no, and when you actually look at the draft, in order for like all three of these quarterbacks to be drafted like consecutively, you're going to need to see some trades because the Bengals need a quarterback. The Dolphins.
Andy Dalton's, they're done with him. You don't want to give him another chance? No.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just making sure, man. I don't know.
Yeah, but so you have, like I said, the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Denver Broncos, Tennessee Titans. These teams need quarterbacks, really, and then maybe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well. But all those teams aren't 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's you're going to have to see guys traded up. So, to think that Tua is going to be the number 1 overall pick right now, I personally do not see that happening at all. Like you're saying, I think Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert are looking better. Both teams are probably going to be ranked ahead of Alabama at the end of the season. Hell, you could see Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow battle it out for the national championship this year. We're not going to see Tua battle anybody because he's out for the season. So that will help those guys draft stock as well. So, and then the fact that Tua is not going to do his workout more than likely, these quarterbacks are going to be, put to the forefront. I don't really think it's that bad of a thing if Tua drops a little bit because he's just going to end up with a better team, to be honest. I mean, you go to
one way to look at it.
You go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they're pretty much a quarterback away and a couple other positions from potentially being a playoff team in the NFL. I like that coaching staff because it was my Arizona Cardinals coaching staff when we almost went to the Super Bowl, and we had 10 wins each season. So it's not like that roster in Tampa Bay is too much far off what that Cardinals roster was. And their biggest issue is their quarterback who throws 17 interceptions every single week. So, dropping to number 8, dropping to number 9, dropping to number 10, I don't think is the worst thing for Tua as well. And maybe going to a team where there's a little bit of quarterback battle and he doesn't have to play right away with some of these injuries and recovery and all that stuff, I don't think it's a bad thing. But yes, this does affect the NFL draft, for my original question, at least what I think, because now I think absolutely he is not going to be neither the top pick in the draft or the top quarterback picked.
No, I agree. You bring up valid points, and I don't think you can argue any of that. Like I mentioned, regardless of Tua's health status, even if he was fully healthy right now, I think that Joe Burrow is outplaying him. And I think once the season is over, after the Super Bowl, when teams can fully put 100% of their efforts into this draft and looking at these players, looking at all of their game film, looking at everything combined, I think you're going to see that Joe Burrow is probably a better NFL quarterback, or at least an NFL-ready quarterback right now. Mm-hmm. Not to say that Tua can't continue to develop and become that guy, but I think you bring up the greatest argument for Tua falling is the fact that he will go to a better team. He's not going to go to a potential 0-16 Cincinnati Bengals, right? Or a 1 or 2 win Miami Dolphins team. He can go to a team that is maybe 500 or just below 500 that is not as bad as the Cincinnati Bengals. So from his standpoint, and as far as winning now, that could be a better play. Obviously, you want to be the highest pick that you can to make the most money and just the prestige and everything that comes with being a top pick. But at the end of the day, you're right. As far as your future goes and setting yourself up for team success, it could be better for Tua if he's drafted number 10 or something like that to a middle of the pack team.
Well, yeah, and also, like I was saying, there only is really 4 or 5 teams here in this first round that need a quarterback absolutely. And I think that's 4 teams, Tennessee, Denver, Miami, and Cincinnati. Everybody else kind of has, and then Tampa Bay, potentially that 5th team if they don't move on from Winston. Miami, Cincinnati, that's going to be tough for him, especially coming back from injuries and stuff like that. I kind of hope he doesn't go there. Give that to Burrow and Herbert. But imagine him being able to give the ball off to Derrick Henry in Tennessee and having that very solid team, solid coaching staff. Being able to give it to Royce Freeman and Philip Lindsay in Denver, and having John Elway as their GM owner and having his influence and stuff like that, and potentially having Joe Flacco on the bench teaching. I think those are a lot better situations. And then also, if he goes to Bruce Arians, he's the quarterback guru. Obviously he hasn't been able to figure out James Winston for some reason.
Yeah, still throwing picks.
But literally every other quarterback Bruce Arians has touched has turned into an MVP caliber player. So at least in the couple of years that he was under them. So all of those situations I think are good for Tua. So maybe, you have these injuries, you break your nose, you break your hip, and you break your ankle, and then all of a sudden now you're on the playoff team next year. And it's like, oh, look what happened there. So it's not the worst thing. Not the worst thing that could happen. All right. Speaking of quarterbacks in the NFL that could be picked up next year.
Yeah. Speaking of teams that need quarterbacks.
Yeah. So we're gonna move on to the Colin Kaepernick workout. And last week we had a great discussion about how we thought the NFL was kind of messing with Colin, how they were putting in all these weird rules and stipulations. At that point, we didn't know how many teams were showing up. It ended up being revealed that 25 teams were going to show up, so essentially 75% of the league was going to show up to this NFL-organized workout. It was going to be at the Atlanta Falcons training facility. It was going to be shot by the NFL and sent to every single team, so essentially only 7 of the teams were going to get videos of this. And that all broke down Saturday because of the decision by Colin Kaepernick to not do his NFL workout, to move the workout over an hour away in southern Georgia, and just kind of put on a show and kind of take it over himself. I believe only 8 teams showed up. I think only 7 confirmed. So that's, you go from 75% to 25%. And after a lot of the actions he did on Saturday, most pundits and most people are saying that Colin might have killed his last chance to play in the NFL. Jared, what are your thoughts on this? Are you going to be as harsh as some of the other people we've seen? Or do you think that because of the way he showed out in his workout, because of some of the talent-wise things that came out, that he still has great arm talent, that he can still throw the long ball, that it still gives him a chance? What are your thoughts on this?
No doubt, Colin Kaepernick hurt his chances of getting back in the NFL. And to be very honest, I don't believe Colin Kaepernick will ever play a snap or even suit up for an NFL team ever again. I think this was that damaging. And here's the thing. Leading up to this workout on Saturday, right? It was like last week, every single day, a new report was coming up about a new story. Oh, the NFL was not going to release the names of the teams or the scouts that would be showing up to this workout. The NFL was providing receivers for Colin Kaepernick, but they wouldn't tell Colin Kaepernick who the receivers were going to be, right? There was, there was a plethora of things that kept coming up that obviously was frustrating Colin Kaepernick, and that I completely understand, right? It's almost like they threw this on Colin Kaepernick with like a week to prepare and say, oh, hey, we're going to give you a workout on Saturday in Atlanta. You need to show up, right? Yeah. I think here's what Colin Kaepernick did from the moment he decided to, or he agreed that he would come to this workout. He said, I'm going to stab the NFL back just like they stabbed me. He said, I'm going to wait until Saturday. I'm going to move the venue. I think he was thinking about this. I'm going to move the venue. I'm going to bring in my own receivers, right? Here's the problem with that. When you stab the shield in the NFL, the shield as a whole, with all 32 owners, most of them who were not in agreement with even giving Colin Kaepernick this opportunity, I feel that Jay-Z, along with the NFL Players Association, really got on Roger Goodell and forced his hand into creating this workout and making it even possible in the first place. So the fact that these owners and Roger Goodell were not really, I feel, 100% on board with this, I think that was, a huge kind of huge thing in itself. And then the fact that Colin Kaepernick kind of stabbed the NFL in the back, the NFL is not going to take that lightly, right? And here's another thing too, right? You said that Colin Kaepernick moved the workout the day of, like 2 hours before, right? The workout was supposed to start at 3 o'clock, and then maybe an hour or two before the workout, he notifies everyone that he's moving it over an hour away. Yeah. So what are these scouts supposed to do who maybe they flew in and they don't have a car? How are they supposed to get to the new facility an hour away, right? You know what I mean? So there were a few scouts who just said, hey, I can't make it there. I thought this workout was going to be scheduled at this time. I'm supposed to be on a plane to get back to wherever my team is playing, right? So Colin Kaepernick right there hurt himself because there were a few scouts from certain teams who automatically had to back out because they couldn't even make it to the new location. So whether Colin Kaepernick thought about that or not, he automatically hurt himself right there. Last point before we get your thoughts. In my opinion, I think we all knew that Colin Kaepernick could still throw the ball. He still had the arm strength. He's been working out 5-6 days a week for the last 3 years. We know he's in great shape. He looks like he's in great shape. We knew he was going to be able to throw the ball. This wasn't about Colin Kaepernick's athleticism or whether he was going to throw the ball. This was about him playing by the NFL's rules and playing ball with the NFL and, in a sense, giving in to what the NFL wanted. Colin Kaepernick basically said, I'm not giving an inch to what the NFL wants, and the NFL is going to have to bow down to me. Guess what, Colin Kaepernick? The NFL will never bow down to anybody. At the end of the day, it is about their bottom line, and if you are negatively affecting their bottom line, their money, you are not going to be in the league for long, if at all. Colin Kaepernick, unfortunately, did nothing to help himself in this situation. He embarrassed the NFL after they went out on a limb and tried to put this workout on for him. And unfortunately, I think that completely ended any of his chances of playing.
Yeah, I'm going to look at this in a common sense scenario. And when you have a job interview, right, do you show up to the job interview with a... Well, first of all, do you show up to the job interview... do you tell the job interviewer, hey, I can't make it to the job interview, I'm not going to come to that one, can you meet me an hour and a half later? No. Do you show up to the workout with a shirt essentially saying that you are a slave? No.
The shirt said Kuta Kinte, by the way.
Kuta Kinte. Do you show up and after the workout, or after your job interview, tell the job interviewer or the job interviewers that they're scared and they need to not be, you know, sissies about this, and they need to just sign me and buck up and all that stuff? No, nobody in their right mind would do this. And I get it's the NFL and there's a lot of money at stake. And not to mention, Colin Kaepernick has a checkered past with the NFL. All of this was conducive to not getting a job, right, Jared? If either of us did that to a job interviewer, they would have said, get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
I don't want to ever see you again. And so this is essentially what Colin Kaepernick did. I'm just going to say it in that sense because it just made no sense to me, all the things that he decided to do. I get that the NFL was being difficult. Well, like you're saying, sometimes I'll say this, if you want something as bad as Colin Kaepernick said that he wanted this, he essentially did everything possible to not get it. And so, to me, like you're saying, I think unless there's a dire circumstance, which I'll outline right here, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. If there's a dire circumstance in the NFL, maybe this year or next year, where a team needs a quarterback and they realize that the likes of Mason Rudolph or Jeff Driscoll or Ryan Tannehill is not going to win you a Super Bowl, maybe they go and say Colin Kaepernick is that guy. But I think it's going to take absolutely crazy circumstances for this man to be on the NFL team. And one more point I wanted to make. I don't remember who said this, so don't credit me on this statement. But if Colin Kaepernick really wanted to play in the NFL, wouldn't he have scheduled a workout like the last 3 years? And maybe teams would have gone. Why did he choose to move a workout to a high school and do his own workout when the NFL gave him? Like, don't you think if he would have said, "Hey, I'm doing this workout. Can you guys come check it out? I'm doing this." He never did that over the last 3 years. So
true,
right? So it's like it all comes down to that Colin Kaepernick really didn't want to play in the NFL, and he's just kind of wanted to broaden his brand as a social justice warrior. So it's a weird scenario. I'm disappointed in Colin because I think we thought the NFL was screwing with him, which they did. But what he did was overly ridiculous, and he kind of lost his chance.
He tried to get them back, but what he failed to realize was that the NFL doesn't throw out many bones to people, right? They do that very rarely. And the fact that they were even hesitant in doing this at first, it's not like they were jumping 2 feet in and saying, oh, we want to give Colin Kaepernick a chance, right? They were basically saying, we don't want to do this, but we're doing it because our hand is being forced a little bit. So we're going to give you a workout in Atlanta, but we're not going to tell you who your receivers are. We're not going to tell you who's showing up to the event, right? So, like, I understand where Colin Kaepernick's frustration comes in, but the fact that you then go behind the NFL's back, stab them in the back by saying, oh, I'm changing the location. Some of the scouts could not even make it. And like I said, most of us knew the kind of shape that he was going to be in.
Yeah.
This wasn't about his physical abilities. This was about whether he was willing to play ball with the NFL, and he clearly was not. So therefore, he will not be playing ball in the NFL anytime soon, if ever.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If he does just play by the rules, and he shows out and does all this stuff and conforms, essentially, which is not his position, but again, if you really want to play in the NFL and you really want to do stuff in life, sometimes you have to conform. And you can't just do everything the way you want to do it. That doesn't work. But so, him doing this, if he would have just conformed, once he gets signed by a team, then the NFL kind of is out of it at that point. Like, they can't do much to him. Now, if he's kneeling on the sideline, they can fine him and they can suspend him if he keeps doing it, which is his own fault. And again, that would be him playing by his own rules. But if he had just conformed and signed with an NFL team, say the Kansas City Chiefs or the Seahawks or the Washington Redskins, something like that, then he can kind of go at it and he can say stuff in the media if he wants, and he can, talk crap on Goodell, because plenty of players do that all the time. They complain about refs, they complain about upper management in the NFL. But he did it when he had no leverage, and that was his biggest problem. And I just don't think we're going to hear from Colin Kaepernick as an NFL player for a very long time, if ever. And I think the only scenario, like I was mentioning earlier, that he would get signed is, like, say if Russell Wilson got hurt in this year's playoffs, and maybe a team like the Seahawks, who have had a lot of players that have been social justice warriors on their team in the past, maybe they go, okay, well, we don't, we understand that it might get us a little bit in trouble with the NFL, but we need this guy. We don't feel that Tavares Jackson, whoever their backup is in Seattle, is good enough to play, so we're going to sign Kaepernick. Maybe the Kansas City Chiefs. If Patrick Mahomes gets hurt this playoffs, they don't trust Matt Moore, they go sign him. Patriots, Tom Brady gets hurt. We know the Patriots will do anything to win. Maybe they sign Kaepernick. So there is a possibility, at least in my mind, but I don't think you're going to see like the Bengals or the Dolphins or the Tennessee Titans or these teams that can just draft a guy, pick up this dude, because he has now shown that he is not ready to conform to really anybody's rules yet. So disappointing for me, but that's what happens when you make ridiculous decisions, and that's what Colin Kaepernick did this week. Any last thoughts?
It is unfortunate because, listening to Stephen A. Smith, who's obviously one of the biggest ESPN personalities out there, along with Adam Schefter of ESPN and multiple other, high top analysts that work in the sports world, they were all basically saying if Colin Kaepernick would have shown up to the NFL's planned workout in Atlanta at the Falcons facility and, like you keep saying, conformed to their plans in a sense, even though it wouldn't have been on his terms. If he would have just kind of, shut his mouth, shown up, worked out, because his actual workout was great. Yeah, he was throwing balls all over the field. Yeah. If he would have just done that, those analysts, those personalities were saying that within 2 to 3 weeks, they felt Colin Kaepernick would have been signed by an NFL team, if not sooner. They were hearing that from inside NFL locker rooms and legitimate inside sources, right? And so that was getting my hopes up, like, oh my gosh, all he's got to do is bite the bullet, in a sense, go out there, show that you can still play, and you're right, you get signed onto a team, then you can go out to the media, and the NFL can't really do a whole lot to you, right? You start cussing or you start bad-mouthing Roger Goodell every time you get on, then he can really start to talk about the social problems going on with the NFL and really bring more to light, shed more light on what he's really trying to do. But the fact that he went against the NFL, now he more than likely won't have a job. Yeah, he can get in front of a camera and say it, but he won't be getting paid by the NFL doing it.
No.
And I think that's the biggest thing, right?
And there's a lot of people out there, too, that after his last couple of years in the NFL don't believe he actually has the ability to play in the NFL.
Oh, stop it.
And that essentially, here's the thing. No, this is a lot of people say this. I've heard this a lot. I've seen this on Twitter. I've heard this word of mouth from people that I know. They don't believe that Colin Kaepernick that essentially the only reason he was even in the question to be in the NFL is because of how famous he got as a social justice warrior. And a workout is not going to prove that. I don't personally believe that he can't be a backup in the NFL. I mean, we look at how bad Mitchell Trubisky is, for God's sake. There's no way Colin Kaepernick can be worse than Mitchell Trubisky, right? And especially after he worked out and looked good. That's kind of where you see it. And like you're mentioning, if he would have just conformed, if he would have done the NFL's workout, if 25 scouts and teams would have seen him, you're right, I think he would have been signed. But after this whole charade and after how difficult he was, I don't think a lot of NFL teams will sign him unless, like I'm saying, it's a dire circumstance and they just use him kind of as a hire.
Well, he better pray for that dire circumstance because right now his shot at the NFL is basically over, and he will have to. Not that he has to ever work again. I mean, he's a multimillionaire, and
True.
he could probably sit at home and eat bonbons and live a happy life.
Yeah.
He's not going to do that. He will more than likely have to find another outlet or another career path, because right now the NFL is looking bleak, and that glimmer of hope that we had for Colin Kaepernick coming back in the NFL is basically shut itself out.
Yes. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left on this podcast. Let's talk about another stupid decision that a player made this past weekend, and that is, and we're not going to analyze this whole thing because it's kind of old news, but we did want to give our thoughts on the Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph brawl. And obviously, nobody is condoning what Myles Garrett did. If you live under a rock, Myles Garrett hit Mason Rudolph in the head with Mason Rudolph's own helmet while his helmet was off. He essentially assaulted him on the football field. But now we've had the suspensions laid down, or lack of suspensions handed down. So, Jared, I know we disagreed on Twitter about this, so we'll kind of take it to the podcast a little bit. What we're going to kind of talk about here is what Mason Rudolph's punishment should be, and debate about what happened here. Because Myles Garrett, tomorrow, Wednesday, he is going to appeal his suspension. Now, his suspension is indefinite, which means literally he could maybe never play in the NFL again. That probably won't happen, but indefinite is not a number. They did say that he's the least suspended for the rest of the regular season and the postseason, should the Browns sneak into that sixth spot. But that suspension has been laid down. Marcus Pouncey, Larry Ogunjobi, his suspensions have been laid out. They're appealing theirs as well. But Mason Rudolph, nothing. Essentially like he had no role in the fight. And people expect him to get fined. But I want to get your thoughts, because you were a little more, you were really against Mason Rudolph getting zero punishment. So explain your reasoning why you think this man, it is ridiculous that he has not been fined or suspended.
Oh, it's very simple. I mean, go back and watch the film. Go on YouTube and type in Mason Rudolph, Myles Garrett fight, and you will clearly see that Mason Rudolph is the instigator of this fight. Now, I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, condoning what Myles Garrett did. What Myles Garrett did was completely wrong. He deserves to be suspended for whatever amount of time the NFL deems necessary. And unfortunately, he's going to have to deal with that. He's going to have to apologize as many times as it takes for Myles Garrett to get back on the field. I played football into college. I've never, ever seen anything like that in my entire playing career, or since I've just been, a fan of watching football at all. Usually what happens in a fight in the NFL or in football in general, when a helmet comes off, that usually signals the end of the fight. Now, sometimes things can still get heated. Sometimes the guy may still throw a punch, but usually when the helmet comes off, that's like, oh, okay, guys, timeout, it's over, because everyone else still has their helmet and shoulder pads on, and you just know that you have the upper hand, the advantage, right? You don't necessarily really want to injure someone. Myles Garrett obviously lost control of himself, says that he blacked out, and he swung Mason Rudolph's helmet and hit him in the head, right? Obviously that is a no-no, so I'm not condoning anything that Myles Garrett did. But it started because of Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph was trying to pull off Myles Garrett's helmet. And if I'm not mistaken, Mason Rudolph kicked Myles Garrett where no man should ever be kicked. And I think you guys can figure out what I'm saying. So for Myles Garrett, I understand why he was upset and why he tried to pull off Mason Rudolph's helmet in the first place, right? Mason Rudolph, like I said, was the one who started this. And then after two Steelers offensive linemen have a hold of Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph charges at Myles Garrett and tries to, whether he wanted to get in another swing or keep talking trash or whatever he was going to do, he ran towards more of the controversy, right? So it's not like he just stopped or stayed on the ground or walked away to the sideline. He continued to antagonize Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
And you're going to sit here and tell me that Mason Rudolph might get a fine? Might get a fine when he was the one to start. Tell me one thing and then I'll let you take the floor.
Yes, please. Yeah.
If Mason Rudolph did not try to take Myles Garrett's helmet off, if Mason Rudolph did not charge after Myles Garrett after he was being restrained, and if Mason Rudolph did not kick Myles Garrett where no man should ever be kicked, would Myles Garrett have pulled off Mason Rudolph's helmet?
No, he would not. But here's the thing.
I'm done. I'm done.
First of all, I don't think he's getting suspended because all of the other dudes involved in the fight got suspended immediately. Literally the next morning while the morning talk shows were going on, before even some of them ended. So I don't think he's getting suspended. He will get fined. If he doesn't get fined, that's a little ridiculous, and I kind of hope he gets some comeuppance from another player potentially, what I'm saying, via like multiple sacks and stuff like that. But here's the thing. I get that he tried to take his helmet off, that he did kick him in the groin, and that he did go after him. The only difference here with comparing Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph's actions during the fight is that if you're in a fight and the person you are fighting is 100 pounds bigger than you and is much taller than you, what you're going to do is maybe try to take advantage as much as you possibly can in a fight. And Mason Rudolph has already been beaten up a lot this season. And to be honest, people saying that Mason Rudolph started this fight, no. Myles Garrett started the brawl by unnecessarily sacking Mason Rudolph after a play when the game had 5 seconds left. If you go watch the tape, like you mentioned, Myles Garrett finishes his tackle, which is actually illegal in the NFL, and you can't do anymore, and I'm surprised there wasn't a flag initially called, and I think actually the brawl would have been broken up quicker because of a ref throwing a flag. But so my only take, and this is why I think he didn't get suspended, and that he's probably not going to get fined a huge amount, is because of the size difference and the reality that a man, having a helmet forcibly removed by a man 75, 100 pounds bigger than him, would make you might kick a guy in the balls, you might punch him in the face, you might keep going after him, and then that guy hits you in the head with a helmet, and then the dude pushes you from behind, and like that's where I think the NFL is going to be like, this guy really got put the pound down in this situation, and that we're gonna hold off, and then maybe they'll put a strike on this record and be like, anything Mason Rudolph does from here on out, that's what it is. I gotta play devil's advocate. We disagree on the scenario, but I just think that's what people looked at in the scenario, that you had a major size difference, and that everything Mason Rudolph did was nowhere close to anything Myles Garrett did because of the size difference.
Number one, you said something at the beginning of your arguments, and I don't think you were directing it at me. I think you were just saying it in general. I'm not comparing what Myles Garrett did to Mason Rudolph as opposed to what Mason Rudolph did to Myles Garrett, right? Neither of them should have done what they did, right? Obviously, Myles Garrett did something extremely excessive, something that we have never seen before in the NFL, right? With a guy actually getting hit over the head with his own helmet. We've never seen that before. We've seen players, trying to pull up face masks and trying to take their helmets off, but never a physical act like that. So I'm not comparing what those two did. But at the end of the day, if you're Mason Rudolph, you've got to be smart too. You are trying to charge at a guy that is over 100 pounds heavier than you just because your two big offensive linemen have that guy pinned, his arms pinned back, so maybe he can't charge at you back. That's you know what I'm saying? Like, if those two Steelers offensive linemen were not holding Myles Garrett back, you're going to tell me that Mason Rudolph would have still charged Myles Garrett?
I think he would have. I think, we talk about Myles Garrett blacking out.
And Mason Rudolph is even more of an idiot than I think.
I think Mason Rudolph might have. been seeing red and all that stuff too. And I get that Myles. I actually understand the reason that Myles Garrett swung the helmet, because you see a guy continually going in. You just have to be smarter than that. And this isn't a street fight on the streets. This is the NFL, and you're getting paid millions of dollars. A lot like, not comparing the two situations, but a lot like Colin Kaepernick being ridiculous over his workout. You just have to be smarter. You just cannot make those dumb decisions, and that's what Myles Garrett did. All I'm saying though is, when you get tackled by a man with 5 seconds left, that's a lot bigger than you, that has a history this year of fighting and all that stuff and being extra physical, and then you're just sick of it, you've been concussed, you've been literally knocked down on the field before. I just think that the NFL put all of that into it. By the way, he's also a quarterback, which they protect a lot more than other players too. I think that's why. But yes, he should absolutely get fined, and I think the fine should be pretty hefty too, because that'll really show him too. Because Mason Rudolph, like we were talking about this before the podcast, he's not a big contract guy, and he's not going to have a big contract. So any fine here is going to affect him a lot more than most other NFL quarterbacks too. Maybe besides Kyle Allen, but obviously he was undrafted. So it's a weird scenario. And Mason Rudolph should get punished. If he's not, we'll definitely talk about it.
NFL, you better suspend him 1 game. Here's the
other
thing. He doesn't need to get suspended multiple games. He needs to be suspended 1 game without pay. He started this act, right? I punch you in the face right now, and then you punch me back. That's technically self-defense, right? You're defending yourself, right? I should be the one that really gets in trouble, right? I break into someone's house. I started that act.
Yeah.
Mason Rudolph started the act.
What I'm saying is, if you look at the tape, Myles Garrett sacked him unnecessarily in a 5-second game against a rival.
And you're going to be dumb enough to try and charge and go after a guy that is way
I would not have done that. I might have punched him in the face. I might have kicked him in the groin. I sure as hell ain't going after him after that, because at that point it's just unstable, but you never know. We've all seen red scenarios. We've all kind of had those weird blackout moments in potential fight scenarios, so you never really know. So we'll leave it at that. We'll see what the suspensions are. I do hope that Myles Garrett does get suspended a little bit next year too, because I think that the ultimate price to pay is that not only are you going to have no take in this season, whether your team goes to Super Bowl or not, but next season, too, you're going to have to sit out a little bit, and in those first couple games, you're not going to be ready and all that stuff. So, yeah, Myles Garrett needs to be punished, and the NFL needs to come down strict, too, because of how violent and how bad that act could have been.
Exactly.
That's it for today's podcast. We'll be back next week, of course, to be talking about all the big college football games that happen, some of the NFL scenarios, and then your Cowboys play the New England Patriots.
Big game on Sunday.
This week, so we'll see what happens there. And then we'll also be talking about any other big news or crazy news that happens, because none of us expected a assault on the field during Thursday Night Football. So for Nick Nenad,
I'm Jared Smith.
This has been the Cover 2 Podcast. See you.
Mason Rudolph, suspended 1 game.
He's not gonna. He's gonna get fired.